don't bother coming to dinner tonight, Rachel. We're having the Hendersons over, and frankly, your situation would make things awkward. My mother's voice was ice cold through the phone, but what she didn't know was that Mrs. Henderson was about to salute me as Lieutenant Commander Blackstone, and everything was about to change. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to where this all started. The autumn leaves crunched under my boots as I walked up the familiar driveway of 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Cedarbrook Heights. I'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. After 18 months deployed in the Persian Gulf, after missing Christmas, Easter, and my father's birthday, I finally had shore leave. Finally, I could sit at my family's dining room table again. The house looked exactly the same. White colonial with blue shutters, my mother's prized rose garden now dormant for winter, the American flag hanging limp in the still November air. Ironic, considering what was about to happen. I knocked on the front door, my dress uniform crisp and pressed, the gold stripes on my sleeves catching the porch light. 3 years in the Navy, 2 deployments, a commendation for excellence in maritime navigation. But to my family, I was still just Rachel, the disappointment who chose military service over the law degree they'd planned for me. My younger sister Cassandra opened the door, her face immediately falling when she saw me. "Oh, Rachel, what are you doing here?" "Family dinner?" I said, confusion creeping into my voice. "Mom said 6 o'clock. I'm actually early." Cassandra shifted uncomfortably, glancing back toward the dining room where I could hear the clinking of fine china. The good stuff, the Waterford crystal that only came out for special occasions. Mom didn't tell you. Plans changed." That's when my mother appeared behind her, wearing her navy blue cocktail dress and the pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked ready for a dinner party, all right, just not one that included me. "Rachel, sweetheart," she said, her tone sickeningly sweet, but her eyes cold. "I tried calling you earlier. We're having the Hendersons over tonight, and with Admiral Henderson's position at the base, well, it would be rather awkward having you here." The words hit me like a physical blow. Admiral Henderson, my commanding officer's commanding officer, the man who'd personally signed off on my promotion to lieutenant commander just 3 months ago. And my mother thought having me there would be awkward? "Awkward?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. My father emerged from the living room adjusting his tie. Robert Blackstone, successful attorney, pillar of the Cedarbrook Heights community, and apparently ashamed of his daughter's choice to serve her country. "Now, Rachel, don't take it personally. It's just that the Admiral has very strong opinions about women in combat roles. We don't want to put him in an uncomfortable position." I stared at my parents, these people who'd raised me, who'd taught me about honor and service through bedtime stories about my grandfather's service in World War II. My grandfather whose Purple Heart sat in a frame on their mantelpiece, whose sacrifice they honored every Veterans Day with solemn Facebook posts about supporting our troops. So let me get this straight. You're uninviting me from family dinner because having an actual service member present might make your dinner guest uncomfortable? My mother's lips pursed. "Don't be dramatic, Rachel. It's just one dinner. Besides, you're always so intense when you talk about your work. Military this, deployment that. The Hendersons don't need to hear all that." Intense. That's what they called my pride in serving my country. That's what they called my stories about ensuring safe passage for humanitarian aid ships, about the lives we'd helped save, about the honor of wearing the uniform. Through the dining room doorway, I could see the table set for 6. My father, my mother, Cassandra, her fiancé Trevor, and the 2 Hendersons. No 7th chair. No place setting with my name. They hadn't just uninvited me. They'd erased me entirely. "You know what?" I said, stepping back from the doorway. "You're absolutely right. Admiral Henderson shouldn't have to deal with the awkwardness of meeting a woman who's dedicated her life to defending the country he serves. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife, but it sailed right over their heads. My mother actually looked relieved. "I'm so glad you understand, sweetheart. We'll do a family dinner soon, I promise. Just the 4 of us." The 4 of us. Not the 5 of us. Because apparently I didn't count as family when it mattered. I turned to leave, my boots echoing on the brick walkway, when I heard a car pulling into the driveway behind me. A black sedan with government plates. My heart sank as I realized Admiral and Mrs. Henderson were arriving just as I was leaving. Perfect timing for maximum humiliation. But as I reached my own car, parked on the street, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Henderson, a distinguished woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, stepped out of the passenger side and looked directly at me. Her gaze took in my uniform, my posture, the ribbons on my chest. And then, to my absolute shock, she came to attention and saluted me. "Lieutenant Commander Blackstone," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who knew exactly who I was. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. My name is Rachel Blackstone. I'm 29 years old. And if you think you know how this story ends, you're in for a surprise. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who see you least clearly. And sometimes recognition comes from the most unexpected places. What happens when the family that uninvites you discovers they've made the biggest mistake of their lives? Stay tuned. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Standing there on Maple Ridge Drive, watching Mrs. Henderson's respectful salute, I felt the weight of 29 years of disappointment crushing down on me. This wasn't the first time my family had chosen appearances over me. It was just the most public humiliation yet. My name is Rachel Marie Blackstone. I'm 29 years old. And if you think you know how this story ends, you're in for a surprise. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who see you least clearly. And sometimes recognition comes from the most unexpected places. What happens when the family that uninvites you discovers they've made the biggest mistake of their lives? Stay tuned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Standing there on Maple Ridge Drive, watching Mrs. Henderson's respectful salute, I felt the weight of 29 years of disappointment crushing down on me. This wasn't the first time my family had chosen appearances over me. It was just the most public humiliation yet. My name is Rachel Marie Blackstone. I'm 29 years old, and if you think you know how this story ends, you're in for a surprise. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who see you least clearly. And sometimes recognition comes from the most unexpected places. What happens when the family that uninvites you discovers they've made the biggest mistake of their lives? Stay tuned. Growing up in Cedarbrook Heights, I was supposed to follow the predetermined path. Valedictorian at Cedarbrook Prep, full ride to Princeton, Harvard Law School, partnership at Blackstone and Associates by 30. The golden child who would carry on the family legacy of legal excellence that stretched back 3 generations. But I had other plans. I still remember the day I told them I was enlisting. Senior year of high school, acceptance letter to Princeton already framed on my father's office wall. I walked into the mahogany-paneled study where he was reviewing case files, my Navy recruiter's pamphlets hidden behind my back like contraband. "Dad, I need to tell you something." He didn't even look up from his legal briefs. "If it's about prom expenses, just put it on the American Express. Your mother's handling all that. I'm joining the Navy." The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally raised his head, his face had gone white. "That's not funny, Rachel." "I'm not joking. I ship out for basic training in August. What followed was 3 hours of lectures about throwing away my potential, about disappointing the family, about how military service is for people who don't have other options. My mother cried. Cassandra called me selfish. My father threatened to cut off my college fund, not realizing I didn't need it anymore. But the worst part wasn't their anger. It was their shame. At my boot camp graduation, every other recruit had family in the stands cheering, taking pictures, beaming with pride. My parents came, but they sat in the back row wearing sunglasses like they were attending a funeral. They left immediately after the ceremony, claiming they had prior commitments. The prior commitment, I later learned, was Cassandra's sorority rush party. When I made it through officer candidate school, ranking 3rd in my class, my father's congratulations was a stiff handshake and a comment about how I could still change my mind and apply to law school. When I got my first ship assignment, my mother asked if I really had to wear the uniform to family events because it made people uncomfortable. Military displays. Like my uniform was a political statement instead of a symbol of service. I spent Christmas Eve in my childhood bedroom, alone, listening to my family laugh downstairs with the Pembertons while I ate leftover turkey from a paper plate. That night, I made myself a promise. I would stop trying to earn their pride. I would stop shrinking myself to fit their comfort zone. I would stop apologizing for choosing honor over money, service over status. But promises are easier to make than keep. Because here I was, 6 months later, standing in their driveway in my dress uniform, still hoping this time would be different, still believing that maybe, finally, they'd see me for who I really was instead of who they wanted me to be. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. Admiral Henderson, the man they thought would be uncomfortable meeting me, was actually the one who'd recommended me for early promotion. The man whose opinion they valued more than their own daughter's happiness had personally commended my leadership during a joint NATO exercise. But they didn't know that. They didn't know anything about my actual service record, my achievements, my responsibilities. To them, I was still just Rachel, the daughter who'd chosen the wrong path and refused to course correct. As Mrs. Henderson continued to regard me with the respect my own family had never shown, I realized something profound. I'd been seeking validation from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it. I'd been trying to prove my worth to judges who'd already decided the case. Tonight was going to change everything. I just didn't know how much yet. Admiral James Henderson stepped out of the driver's side, his dress uniform immaculate, ribbons and decorations spanning his chest like a roadmap of distinguished service. He was exactly as I remembered from official ceremonies. Tall, commanding presence, steel gray hair, perfectly groomed. But seeing him here in my family's driveway while I stood there like an unwanted guest felt surreal. "Admiral Henderson, sir," I said, coming to attention and rendering a crisp salute. He returned it with practiced precision, but there was something in his eyes. Surprise, confusion, perhaps recognition. "Admiral Henderson, sir," I said, coming to attention and rendering a crisp salute. He returned it with practiced precision, but there was something in his eyes. Surprise, confusion, perhaps recognition. "Lieutenant Commander Blackstone, what brings you to Cedarbrook Heights?" Before I could answer, my father appeared at the front door, his face a mixture of panic and forced joviality. "Admiral Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, welcome, welcome. Please, come in. We've been so looking forward to this evening." The Admiral's gaze shifted between me and my father, clearly trying to piece together the connection. "Robert, I believe you know Lieutenant Commander Blackstone." My father's smile faltered for just a microsecond. "Oh, yes, of course. Rachel is..." She's our daughter. The way he said it, like I was a minor inconvenience, a footnote in his biography, made my chest tighten. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows raised slightly, and I could see her filing this information away for later analysis. Your daughter, Admiral Henderson repeated slowly. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Blackstone, who led the convoy escort mission through the Strait of Hormuz last spring, is your daughter. My father blinked rapidly, clearly having no idea what the Admiral was referring to. Yes, well, she's been busy with her Navy work. Navy work. Like I'd been filing paperwork instead of ensuring the safe passage of humanitarian aid through one of the world's most dangerous waterways. Admiral Henderson turned back to me, his expression now completely focused. Lieutenant Commander, I was just reviewing your service record this afternoon. Outstanding performance ratings across the board. Your commanding officer speaks very highly of your leadership during the Gulf operations. I felt a flush of pride, but it was immediately dampened by the look of bewilderment on my father's face. He had no idea what we were talking about. None of them did. Thank you, sir. It's been an honor to serve under Captain Martinez's command. Captain Martinez mentioned you're being considered for the Naval War College program. That's quite an achievement for someone your age. The Naval War College, the pinnacle of professional military education? I'd submitted my application 6 months ago, but hadn't told my family because I knew they'd find a way to diminish it, or worse, try to talk me out of it. My mother appeared beside my father, her hostess smile perfectly plastered in place. Admiral, Mrs. Henderson, please don't let us keep you standing in the cold. Dinner is ready and we're so excited to spend the evening with you. She completely ignored the conversation about my service record, as if the Admiral hadn't just revealed that her daughter was being considered for one of the military's most prestigious educational programs. Mrs. Henderson stepped closer to me. Lieutenant Commander, will you be joining us for dinner? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. My mother's face went pale. My father cleared his throat nervously. Through the front window, I could see Cassandra and Trevor hovering in the hallway, probably listening to every word. Actually, my mother said quickly, Rachel was just leaving. She has other commitments tonight. Other commitments. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily. Admiral Henderson's expression shifted, a slight frown creasing his brow. This was a man who'd spent 30 years in the Navy, who understood honor, duty, and family bonds. He was clearly processing the fact that military families typically celebrated their service members' achievements, not shuffled them off to avoid awkwardness. I see, he said slowly. That's unfortunate. I was hoping to discuss the Henderson Maritime Security Initiative with her. Her experience in convoy operations would be invaluable to the program.
My heart stopped. The Henderson Maritime Security Initiative was a joint Navy Coast Guard program designed to improve international shipping lane protection. It was exactly the kind of assignment that could define a career, and Admiral Henderson wanted to discuss it with me. My father's face had gone from confusion to what I could only describe as barely contained panic. The same admiral he was trying to impress was specifically seeking input from the daughter he'd just uninvited from dinner. Perhaps, Admiral Henderson continued, his tone becoming more formal, we could reschedule this dinner for a time when Lieutenant Commander Blackstone is available. I'd very much like to include her in our discussion about the future of maritime security operations. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My father seemed to have forgotten how to form words. Through the window, I could see Cassandra's face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Henderson, bless her, seemed to understand exactly what was happening. James, perhaps we should invite Lieutenant Commander Blackstone to join us anyway. I'm sure whatever other commitments she has could be rearranged for such an important discussion. The trap was complete. My parents had painted themselves into a corner with their own lies. They'd uninvited me to avoid awkwardness, but now the very person they were trying to impress was specifically requesting my presence. The daughter they were ashamed of was suddenly the guest of honor. My father's legal training kicked in, and I could see him frantically searching for a way out of this situation. Well, of course, if the Admiral feels it's important. I do. In fact, Lieutenant Commander Blackstone's insights would be essential to any meaningful discussion about current maritime security operations. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. The elegant dinner party she'd planned, the carefully curated guest list designed to impress the Admiral, was falling apart because the daughter she'd excluded was exactly who he wanted to speak with. "Rachel," my father said, his voice strained, "perhaps you could join us after all." But something had shifted inside me. Standing there in my dress uniform, hearing Admiral Henderson speak about my service with the respect and recognition my own family had never shown, I realized something profound. I didn't need their table. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to beg for scraps of recognition from people who fundamentally didn't understand or value what I dedicated my life to. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I do have other commitments tonight." It was the first time in my adult life I'd chosen myself over their expectations. The first time I'd refused to rearrange my dignity to accommodate their comfort. And as the words left my mouth, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete, unwavering certainty that I was making the right choice. Admiral Henderson nodded slowly, and I could see something like approval in his eyes. Mrs. Henderson smiled at me with what looked like pride. My parents, meanwhile, looked like they were watching their carefully constructed world crumble around them. "I understand completely, Lieutenant Commander," Admiral Henderson said. "Perhaps we could arrange a meeting at the base next week instead." "I'd be honored, sir." And for the first time in my adult life, I turned my back on my family's expectations and walked toward my car with my head held high. I was 3 steps from my car when my mother's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. "Rachel Marie Blackstone, you get back here this instant." Her tone was the same one she'd used when I was 12 and caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Sharp, authoritative, designed to make me stop in my tracks and obey without question. For 29 years, that tone had worked. Tonight, it didn't even make me pause. "Rachel!" My father's voice joined hers, louder, more desperate. "This is ridiculous. Come back and join us for dinner." I reached my car and turned around slowly, deliberately. Admiral and Mrs. Henderson were still standing in the driveway, clearly uncomfortable witnesses to this family drama. My parents flanked them like bookends, my mother's perfect composure finally cracking, my father's face red with embarrassment and anger. "Let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice carrying the same calm authority I used when addressing my crew during rough seas. 20 minutes ago, you uninvited me from dinner because having me here would be awkward for your guests. Now you want me to come back because it turns out your guests actually want to speak with me?" My mother's hands fluttered nervously at her pearl necklace. "Rachel, you're being dramatic. We never uninvited you. We simply thought..." "You thought Admiral Henderson would be uncomfortable meeting a woman in military service. You told me having me here would put him in an uncomfortable position because of his opinions about women in combat roles." Admiral Henderson's face went very still. His wife's mouth formed a small O of surprise. I could see the pieces clicking together in their minds. Not only had my parents excluded their own daughter from dinner, but they'd attributed sexist opinions to the Admiral that he clearly didn't hold. "Is that what you told her?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice icy. "That my husband has problems with women in military service?"
My father looked like he wanted to disappear into the perfectly manicured hedges. "Well, we thought, given the Admiral's generation and traditional military background." Traditional military background? Admiral Henderson's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of 3 decades of command authority. "Lieutenant Commander Blackstone, could you enlighten your father about the composition of my current staff?" I almost smiled. Sir, if I recall correctly, your Chief of Staff is Captain Angela Reeves, your Intelligence Officer is Commander Sarah Chang, and your Operations Director is Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos. That's correct. 3 of my 4 senior staff members are women, all exceptional officers who've earned their positions through merit, dedication, and outstanding service. His gaze fixed on my father with laser precision. I'm curious about what gave you the impression I'd be uncomfortable meeting another accomplished female service member. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. My father's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My mother had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Through the front window, I could see Cassandra and Trevor still watching, their faces pressed against the glass like children watching a car accident. Perhaps, Mrs. Henderson said coolly, we should reschedule this dinner for another time, when all family members are welcome. No, my mother said quickly, panic edging her voice. Please, there's been a misunderstanding. Rachel, sweetheart, of course you're welcome. You're always welcome. This is your home. My home? The house where my service photos were hidden in drawers? Where my uniform made people uncomfortable? Where my deployments were treated like extended vacations and my promotions like minor inconveniences? Where I ate Christmas dinner alone while they entertained guests who supposedly couldn't handle my presence. Is it? I asked. Because 5 minutes ago, you made it very clear that this home, this table, this family was for people who fit your vision of success. And apparently, defending my country doesn't qualify. My father stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Rachel, you're twisting our words. We were simply trying to be considerate of our guests' comfort. By lying about their opinions and excluding your own daughter? Admiral Henderson cleared his throat. If I may interrupt this family discussion, I'd like to make something clear. Lieutenant Commander Blackstone, your service record speaks for itself. Your leadership during the Strait of Hormuz operations prevented what could have been an international incident. Your convoy protection protocols have been adopted fleet-wide. The idea that I would be uncomfortable meeting you is not only incorrect, but frankly insulting to everything I believe about military service. Each word hit my parents like a physical blow. My mother's face crumpled. My father's shoulders sagged. They were learning in real time that the daughter they'd spent years minimizing was actually distinguished in ways they'd never bothered to discover. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, I specifically requested this meeting tonight because I wanted to discuss the Maritime Security Initiative with someone who has actual operational experience. Your parents led me to believe you'd be here. They led you to believe that because until 20 minutes ago, I was supposed to be here. Until they decided my presence would be an embarrassment. Mrs. Henderson shook her head slowly. Admiral, I think we should leave this family to sort out their priorities. Lieutenant Commander, would you be available for lunch tomorrow? I'd very much like to continue our conversation in a more appropriate setting. It was the final humiliation. The guests my parents had been so desperate to impress were now preferring my company to theirs. The dinner party they'd planned for weeks was disintegrating because they'd excluded the one person their honored guests actually wanted to meet. I'd be honored, Mrs. Henderson. My mother made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Please don't go, any of you. We'll set another place. Rachel, please stay. We can work this out. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. Standing there in my dress uniform, hearing my service described with the respect and pride my own family had never shown, I finally understood what I'd been missing all these years. It wasn't their approval I needed. It was my own self-respect. Mom, I said gently, you can't uninvite someone and then expect them to stay when it becomes convenient. You can't spend years treating my service like a phase and then suddenly want me here when it turns out to be impressive to your guests. I looked at each of them, my parents with their stricken faces, the Hendersons with their obvious discomfort, Cassandra and Trevor still watching through the window like this was dinner theater. I've spent 10 years trying to earn a seat at this table. 10 years hoping you'd see my service as something to be proud of, instead of something to hide. 10 years shrinking myself to fit your comfort zone. But tonight, I finally realized something. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of my uniform not as a burden, but as armor. I don't need your table. I've got my own. The words hung in the air like a declaration of independence. My mother started crying openly. My father looked like I'd physically struck him. Admiral Henderson nodded slowly, and I caught something that might have been approval in his expression. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen my own dignity over their expectations, and it felt like breathing after being underwater for a decade. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house where I'd never really belonged toward a life where I finally did. I hadn't even reached the end of Maple Ridge Drive when my phone started buzzing. First one call, then another, then a rapid succession of notifications that made my car's Bluetooth system sound like a slot machine hitting jackpot. All from my family, all trying to drag me back into their carefully orchestrated world. I pulled over at Cedar Creek Park, 3 miles from the house, and checked my phone. 14 missed calls, 9 text messages, 2 voicemails. It had been exactly 12 minutes since I'd driven away. The first text was from Cassandra, and it was exactly what I expected. What the hell was that? Mama's having a complete breakdown. You've ruined everything. Ruined everything. Not, we're sorry for excluding you, or we made a mistake. I had ruined everything by refusing to be complicit in my own erasure. My phone rang again. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message back. Rachel, this is your father. I don't know what's gotten into you tonight, but this behavior is completely unacceptable. You've embarrassed your mother, embarrassed me, and worst of all, you've embarrassed our family in front of very important guests. Admiral Henderson is a powerful man in this community, and your little tantrum has put us all in an extremely difficult position. Call me back immediately so we can discuss how to fix this mess. Fix this mess. The mess I created by standing up for myself. Not the mess they'd created by lying about a superior officer's opinions, or by excluding their own daughter from dinner, or by treating my military service like a dirty secret for the past decade. The second voicemail was from my mother. Her voice is shaky and thick with tears. Rachel, sweetheart, please come home. I don't understand what happened tonight. We love you, we've always loved you, and you know you're welcome in our home. The Hendersons left, they said they needed to reschedule, and now your father is furious, and Cassandra is crying, and I just don't understand why you choose to hurt us like this. Please, baby, just come home and we'll talk this through like adults. Like adults. Adults who had spent the evening treating me like an inconvenient child whose presence needed to be managed and hidden. Another text from Cassandra. Trevor's parents were supposed to meet the Hendersons tonight. You know how important this dinner was for his family's business connections. How could you be so selfish? Selfish. The word they always used when I didn't sacrifice myself for their convenience. I was selfish for enlisting instead of following their predetermined path, selfish for choosing deployments over family vacations, selfish for not coming home every weekend during my brief shore leaves. And now I was selfish for refusing to accept their last-minute invitation after they'd made it clear I wasn't wanted. My phone buzzed with a call from my father again. This time, I answered. Dad? Rachel, thank God. Listen to me very carefully. I need you to come back to the house right now. The Hendersons haven't left yet. They're sitting in their car having what appears to be a very serious discussion. Mrs. Henderson specifically asked if you'd be returning. We can still salvage the situation if you just... If I just what, Dad? If I just pretend the last hour didn't happen? If I just smile and act grateful that you suddenly decided I'm worthy of breathing the same air as your honored guests? Don't be ridiculous, Rachel. We never said you weren't worthy. We were trying to protect you from an awkward situation. Protect me? I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. You were protecting yourselves. You were afraid that having your military daughter present might make your guests uncomfortable, so you decided the easiest solution was to just remove me from the equation? That's not... You're twisting this around. We were being considerate. To everyone except your own daughter. There's a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on the tone he used in court when he was losing an argument. Cold, calculated, designed to regain control. Rachel, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. Admiral Henderson is the most influential military figure in this region. His recommendation could make or break careers, including your own. Mrs. Henderson sits on the board of 3 major defense contractors. These are not people you want to alienate by throwing a tantrum in their presence. A tantrum? My refusal to accept their humiliation was a tantrum. Is that what you think happened, Dad? I threw a tantrum? I think you let your emotions override your common sense, and now you need to come back here and do damage control before the situation gets completely out of hand. Damage control. Military terminology he didn't understand, used to manipulate me into compliance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Another text came through, this one from my mother. Rachel, Mrs. Henderson just asked for your phone number. She wants to speak to you directly. Please don't do anything to make this worse. Make this worse, as if it was my actions that had created this disaster, rather than their decision to exclude me in the first place. My phone rang again. Cassandra this time.
Rachel, I need you to understand something, she said, without preamble when I answered. Trevor's family has been trying to get an introduction to Admiral Henderson for months. His father's company has contracts coming up for review, and tonight was supposed to be their chance to make a personal connection. Do you have any idea what your little drama has cost us? What it's cost you? I repeated slowly. Cassandra, help me understand something. How exactly does my absence from dinner affect Trevor's father's business prospects? Because now the Hendersons think our family is dysfunctional. They witnessed us having a screaming match in the driveway instead of seeing us as the stable, successful family we are. First impressions matter, Rachel, and you've completely destroyed ours. So let me get this straight. You exclude me from dinner because my presence might be awkward. But then when I actually leave, my absence somehow makes the family look dysfunctional. That's not... You're being deliberately obtuse. No, Cassandra, I'm being clear. You can't have it both ways. You can't push me out and then blame me for not being there. Fine, she snapped. You want to play word games? Here's the truth. Mom and Dad made a judgment call about what would be best for tonight's dinner. Maybe they were wrong, maybe they weren't, but you had 2 choices when that became clear. You could have been gracious about it and found a way to smooth things over, or you could have thrown a fit and made everything about you. Guess which one you chose? Made everything about me. Because apparently expecting basic respect from my own family was narcissistic? Because refusing to be invisible was selfish? Because standing up for myself was dramatic? You know what, Cassandra? You're absolutely right. I made everything about me. For exactly 5 minutes,
I made everything about me. After 10 years of making everything about everyone else, I finally chose myself. And if that makes me selfish, then I guess I'm selfish. Rachel! I'm done. I hung up and immediately turned my phone to silent mode. But the messages kept coming. I could see the notifications lighting up my screen like Christmas tree lights. Dad calling again, Mom texting, even Trevor sent a message. Hope we can work this out. Family is important. Family is important? From someone who'd watched his future in-laws humiliate their own daughter and said nothing? I sat in my car in the empty parking lot watching the sunset over Cedar Creek and realized something profound. They weren't trying to apologize. They weren't acknowledging that they'd hurt me or that their behavior had been wrong. They were trying to manage me, to manipulate me back into compliance, to convince me that the problem wasn't their actions, but my reaction to their actions. Every call, every text, every voicemail was designed to make me feel guilty for choosing my own dignity over their comfort. They wanted me to believe that their embarrassment was my fault, that their damaged relationships were my responsibility, that their inability to face the consequences of their choices was somehow my problem to solve. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't buying it, and I wasn't going back. I was still sitting in the Cedar Creek parking lot when an unknown number called my phone. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lieutenant Commander Blackstone? The voice was warm, refined, unmistakably Mrs. Henderson. Yes, ma'am. My dear, I hope you don't mind that I asked your parents to your number. My husband and I are having coffee at Millfield Cafe on Harbor Street, and we were wondering if you might join us. We'd very much like to continue our conversation from earlier this evening. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 8:30 p.m. They'd left my parents' house less than an hour ago, and instead of going home or finding another restaurant, they were asking to spend their evening with me? Mrs. Henderson, that's very kind, but I don't want to impose on your evening. I know you were looking forward to dinner with my family. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. Rachel, may I call you Rachel? Let me be frank with you. In 32 years of military life, I've seen many things that have disappointed me. But watching parents dismiss their own daughter's distinguished service while claiming to act in my husband's best interests, that was particularly difficult to witness. My throat tightened. Ma'am, I appreciate that, but no buts, dear. You handled that situation with more grace and dignity than I would have managed at your age, or possibly at my age. Now, we're at corner table by the window, and we have a lot to discuss about your future. Are you coming or not? 20 minutes later, I walked into Millfield Cafe still wearing my dress uniform, feeling oddly like I was reporting for duty. Admiral Henderson stood when he saw me, a gesture of respect I'd never received from my own father. Mrs. Henderson smiled and gestured to the chair across from them. Thank you for coming, Admiral Henderson said as I sat down. After tonight's events, my wife and I felt it important to have a proper conversation with you.
The cafe was quiet, mostly empty except for a few college students studying in the corner and an elderly couple sharing dessert. Soft jazz played in the background, and the warm lighting felt like a sanctuary after the harsh fluorescence of my family's judgment. First, Mrs. Henderson said, I want you to know that what we witnessed tonight was completely unacceptable. Your parents' behavior toward you was not only inappropriate, but frankly, shocking. Admiral Henderson nodded gravely. In all my years of service, I've learned that you can judge a person's character by how they treat those who can't fight back. Tonight, we watched your family treat their own daughter with a lack of respect that was genuinely disturbing. I stared down at my coffee cup, emotions threatening to overwhelm me. They've always been disappointed that I chose military service over law school. Their disappointment
Mrs. Henderson said firmly, is their failure, not yours. Rachel, may I tell you something about your service record? I looked up, surprised. My husband doesn't just know your name from personnel files. He specifically requested you for the Maritime Security Initiative because Captain Martinez won't stop talking about your leadership capabilities. According to your commanding officer, you single-handedly prevented a diplomatic incident during the Hormuz operations by recognizing and diffusing a potential confrontation between Iranian patrol boats and civilian vessels. You kept your cool under pressure, made tactical decisions that protected both military and civilian assets, and demonstrated the kind of leadership we desperately need in senior positions. That's why I wanted to meet with you tonight. That's why I was looking forward to discussing your future with someone who clearly understands what military service means. My parents had no idea. In all their years of treating my deployments like extended business trips, they'd never once asked what I actually did during those months at sea. They'd never wanted to know about the lives protected, the crises averted, the responsibilities carried. To them, I was just Rachel playing soldier, instead of Rachel fulfilling her potential. Instead, Mrs. Henderson continued, we walked into a situation where your own family was treating you like an embarrassment to be managed rather than an accomplished officer to be celebrated. The weight of their words, the validation I'd been seeking for years from the wrong people, hit me like a physical force. I felt tears threatening and fought them back. The irony, Admiral Henderson said with a slight smile, is that your parents were worried about impressing me. But the most impressive thing in that house tonight was their daughter, the one they tried to hide. A text notification buzzed on my phone, then another. My family's pressure campaign was continuing, but sitting here with people who actually understood and valued my service, their frantic messages felt distant and irrelevant. Mrs. Henderson glanced at my phone. Are they still trying to convince you to come back? They want me to do damage control. They think I've embarrassed the family. You embarrassed the family? Admiral Henderson's voice carried a note of disbelief. Rachel, let me tell you what actually happened tonight. Your parents lied about my opinions to justify excluding you from dinner. When that lie was exposed, they panicked and tried to pressure you into pretending none of it had happened. You maintained your dignity throughout the entire situation, while they revealed themselves to be people who value appearances over their own daughter's worth. The embarrassment, Mrs. Henderson added gently, was entirely theirs, and frankly, it should be. Another text came through. I glanced at it without thinking. Dad here. The Hendersons just called and asked for your address. They want to send you something. I told them you were probably home by now and gave them our address. Hope you're ready to apologize when they show up. I showed them the message. Admiral Henderson's expression darkened. They gave you your childhood address. They assume I'll go back there. They always assume I'll eventually come around and apologize for standing up for myself. Mrs. Henderson exchanged a look with her husband. Rachel, what's your current address? I gave them my apartment information, confused about why they needed it. Good, Admiral Henderson said, because we're not going to your parents' house. We're going to yours. Sir? My wife mentioned we wanted to send you something. We do. But not to the house where you were treated so poorly tonight. We're going to your home, where you deserve to be treated with the respect you've earned. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed with another message from Cassandra. The Hendersons' car just pulled up. Thank God you came to your senses. Mom is setting a place for you right now. But I wasn't coming to my senses. For the first time in years, I was already there. An hour later, I sat in my small but comfortable apartment living room, still in my dress uniform, watching Admiral and Mrs. Henderson examine the photos on my walls. Pictures from my deployments, my crew, my ship, the life my family had never wanted to see. This is who you really are, Mrs. Henderson said, studying a photo of me with my navigation team after successfully guiding a humanitarian convoy through rough seas. This is the daughter they should be celebrating.
Admiral Henderson turned from my bookshelf, where my Naval Academy textbooks sat alongside current military strategy publications. Rachel, I want to make you an offer. The Maritime Security Initiative needs a deputy director, someone with operational experience and leadership capabilities. It's a career-defining position that would put you on track for your own command within 5 years. My phone, which had been buzzing constantly, suddenly went quiet. I imagined my family waiting at their perfectly set table, wondering why the Hendersons weren't arriving to deliver whatever message they thought would bring me home. Sir, I would be honored to accept. Excellent. We'll make it official Monday morning. He smiled. Your parents were right about one thing tonight. This dinner was important for your future, just not in the way they imagined. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson paused at my door. Rachel, I need you to understand something. The way your family treated you tonight isn't normal. It isn't acceptable. And it isn't your responsibility to fix. When they left, I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages. The last one, from my mother, sent just 10 minutes ago. Where are you? The Hendersons never came. Dad is furious. We've been waiting for hours. I deleted it without responding. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I belonged, and it had nothing to do with their table. I woke up Saturday morning to the sound of silence. No phone buzzing, no frantic messages, no desperate voicemails. For a moment, I thought the storm had passed. Then I checked my phone and realized I'd forgotten to turn the ringer back on after silencing it the night before. 47 notifications. The barrage had continued through the night, a relentless campaign designed to wear down my resolve. I scrolled through them with my morning coffee, watching the progression from anger to manipulation to outright desperation. 12:47 a.m. Dad. Rachel, this has gone far enough. Your mother cried herself to sleep. Is this really what you wanted? 1:23 a.m. Cassandra. Trevor's parents drove 2 hours for tonight. They left thinking our family is a disaster. I hope you're proud of yourself. 2:15 a.m. Mom. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about my little girl and wondering where I went wrong. Please come home so we can fix this. 3:41 a.m. Dad. The Hendersons never showed up to deliver whatever message they had for you. We waited until midnight. Your behavior has consequences beyond just our family, Rachel. But it was the morning messages that showed me just how far they were willing to go. 7:30 a.m. Cassandra. Great Aunt Dorothy heard about last night from Cousin Margaret. She's flying in from Portland because she's worried about family unity. See what you've started? 8:15 a.m. Dad. Admiral Henderson's aide called. Apparently he wants to meet with you Monday morning. I assume this is about your performance last night. You need to be very careful about what you say. Military careers can be destroyed by poor judgment. Poor judgment. My father, who had never served a day in uniform, was warning me about military careers, while simultaneously threatening that my standing up for myself would destroy mine. 8:45 a.m. Mom. Sweetheart, I've been thinking all night. Maybe we didn't handle things perfectly yesterday, but families work through problems together. Running away and embarrassing us in front of important people isn't the answer. Please come to lunch today. Just family. We'll talk this through properly. The messages kept coming as I showered and dressed. Each one more manipulative than the last. Each one designed to make me feel guilty for their choices. But something had shifted permanently during my conversation with the Hendersons. I could see the manipulation now, could recognize the patterns I'd been blind to for years. By noon, my phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time it wasn't the Hendersons. Rachel? This is your cousin Margaret from Seattle. I hadn't spoken to Margaret in 3 years, not since Cassandra's engagement party. She was my father's brother's daughter, a successful real estate attorney who'd always seemed to understand the family dynamics better than most. Hi, Margaret. I'm guessing you've heard about last night? Oh, honey, I've heard about last night, this morning, and apparently what's planned for this afternoon. Your Aunt Dorothy is driving down from Portland as we speak, convinced she needs to stage some kind of family intervention. I rubbed my temples. An intervention? For what? According to your parents, you've become rebellious and disrespectful and need family guidance to get back on track. They're telling everyone you threw a tantrum at dinner and embarrassed them in front of important people. That's their version of events? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Rachel, can I ask you something? What actually happened last night? So I told her. Everything.
The uninviting from dinner, the lies about Admiral Henderson's supposed opinions, the desperate scrambling when their story fell apart, my decision to leave rather than accept their humiliation. When I finished, Margaret was silent for a long time. Jesus Christ, Rachel. What? They uninvited you from dinner and then blamed you for not being there? That's the simplified version, yes. And they told Admiral Henderson that you had other commitments instead of admitting they'd excluded you? Right.
Honey, that's not rebellious behavior, that's self-respect. And frankly, it's about time. Her words hit me like a lifeline. For 24 hours, I'd been second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I had overreacted, if maybe I should have just swallowed my pride and played along. But hearing someone else validate my choice, someone who knew my family well enough to understand the dynamics, felt like breathing after being underwater. Margaret, can I ask you something? Has the family always talked about my military service this way? Another long pause. Rachel, you want the truth? Please. Your parents have spent the last 10 years treating your Navy career like a phase they're waiting for you to outgrow. At family gatherings, they changed the subject when people ask about your deployments. When you got promoted to Lieutenant Commander, your mother told everyone you were still playing soldier instead of settling down with a real career. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't move to reheat it. They said that? Your father actually told Uncle Jim that your military service was a waste of a good education and that they were hoping you'd come to your senses and apply to law school. This was at Christmas dinner 2 years ago, Rachel, while you were deployed in the Mediterranean. I felt sick. While I'd been serving my country, protecting shipping lanes and conducting humanitarian missions, my parents had been apologizing for my existence to extended family. But here's what's really twisted, Margaret continued. Last night, after whatever disaster went down at dinner, your mother called my mom in tears, not because she felt bad about how they'd treated you, but because she was worried about how the family would look if word got out about the conflict with the Hendersons. She was worried about appearances. She was worried about damage control. Your father spent the next 2 hours on the phone with various family members, spinning the story to make it sound like you'd caused some kind of scene instead of just leaving. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Rachel, this is your cousin David from Chicago. Heard there was some kind of family emergency. Hope everyone's okay. Call if you need anything. The misinformation campaign was spreading. They were turning my moment of self-respect into a family crisis, painting me as the problem that needed to be solved, rather than the daughter who'd finally stood up for herself. Margaret, how many people have they called? From what I can tell, most of the extended family. Your Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Jim, Cousin Sarah in Denver, the Hendersons from your mom's side, they're telling everyone that you're going through some kind of difficult phase and need family support to get through it. A difficult phase, like standing up to a decade of disrespect was teenage rebellion instead of adult boundary setting. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a delivery truck. When I opened the door, the driver handed me an enormous bouquet of flowers. White roses, lilies, baby's breath. The card read, Rachel, please forgive us. We love you more than you know. Come home. Mom, Dad, and Cassandra. I set the flowers on my kitchen counter and stared at them. Beautiful, expensive, perfectly arranged. Just like everything else in my family's world, designed to look good on the surface while ignoring the rot underneath. Margaret, they just sent flowers. Of course they did. Did the card mention anything about being wrong or apologizing for their behavior or acknowledging that they hurt you? I read it again. It asks for forgiveness and says they love me, but it doesn't admit fault. No. Classic Blackstone family move. Make a grand gesture that looks loving and generous, but never actually acknowledge wrongdoing. Your parents perfected that technique when we were kids. Another text came through, this one from Dad. Sent flowers to your apartment. Hope you'll reconsider lunch today. The whole family is concerned about you. The whole family?
The same family that had spent years minimizing my achievements and hiding my service. Now they were concerned about me because I'd finally stopped accepting their treatment? My phone rang again, this time from a number from Portland, Aunt Dorothy. Rachel Marie, what on earth is going on down there? Your parents are beside themselves with worry. Hi, Aunt Dorothy. Your mother called me at 6 this morning, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said you'd had some kind of breakdown at dinner and stormed out in front of important guests. Now she's convinced you're having some sort of crisis and need family intervention to get through it. A breakdown? That's what they were calling my refusal to accept humiliation? Aunt Dorothy, did they tell you why I left? Something about a misunderstanding with dinner plans? They uninvited me from dinner because they thought having me there would embarrass them in front of their guests. When it turned out their guests actually wanted to meet me, they tried to pressure me into coming back and pretending nothing had happened. Silence on the other end of the line. They uninvited you? Yes, ma'am. From family dinner? From family dinner. And then they expected you to come back? They expected me to apologize for being upset about it. Another long pause. When Aunt Dorothy spoke again, her voice had completely changed. Rachel, honey, I think I need to make some phone calls.
Sunday morning arrived with unexpected quiet. No phone calls before dawn, no desperate text messages, no flower deliveries. For the first time in 48 hours, my family had gone silent. The calm felt ominous, like the stillness before a storm. I was making pancakes when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Aunt Dorothy standing on my doorstep, alone, holding a small gift bag and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. Aunt Dorothy? I thought you were going to my parents' house. I was, she said, stepping into my apartment. I did, and then I left. She looked around my living room, taking in the military photos, the commendation certificates on the wall, the bookshelf filled with naval history and strategy texts. This is who you really are, isn't it? I poured her coffee and waited while she studied a photo of me with my navigation team. She was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with something that sounded like regret. Rachel, I owe you an apology. A big one. You do? I've been complicit in something I didn't even realize was happening. For years, I've listened to your parents talk about your Navy phase and your stubborn streak and your refusal to settle down with a real career. I nodded along because I thought parents knew their children best. She sat down across from me, her coffee untouched. But yesterday, after our phone call, I did something I should have done years ago. I called Captain Martinez at the naval base. My stomach dropped. You called my commanding officer? I called him because I wanted to understand what kind of officer you really are, whether your parents' concerns about your difficult phase had any basis in reality. She smiled sadly. Rachel, that man talked about you for 20 minutes. He used words like exceptional, irreplaceable, and future admiral material. He told me about the Hormuz incident, about your leadership during storm rescues, about recommendations you've received from NATO commanders. I stared into my coffee, emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Then I drove to your parents' house for what I thought would be a family meeting to discuss how to help you through whatever crisis they described. Instead, I walked into something that made my stomach turn. What do you mean? Your father had prepared a presentation, Rachel, a literal PowerPoint presentation about your pattern of rebellious behavior and the family's plan to stage an intervention. He had slides about your rejection of family values, your antisocial career choice, and the need for unified family pressure to bring you back into line. I felt the blood drain from my face. He made a presentation about me? complete with a timeline of what he called your concerning decisions: enlisting instead of attending Princeton, choosing deployments over family vacations, refusing to leave the Navy for law school. He presented your entire military career as evidence of psychological instability. The pancakes I'd eaten turned to lead in my stomach. While I was serving my country with distinction, my father had been building a case against my life choices like I was a defendant in his courtroom. But the worst part, Aunt Dorothy continued, was when I asked him to explain exactly what had happened at dinner Friday night. Rachel, he couldn't keep his story straight. First, he said you'd been invited but chose not to come. Then he said there had been a miscommunication about timing. Finally, when I pressed him, he admitted they'd told you not to come because your presence would be awkward for their guests. And what did Mom say? Your mother kept talking about how dramatic you were being, how you'd overreacted to a simple family decision. When I asked her if she understood why excluding you from dinner might hurt your feelings, she said you were being too sensitive and that military service had made you confrontational. Aunt Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. Rachel, I watched your parents spend 2 hours discussing you like you were a problem to be solved, rather than a daughter to be loved. Not once did either of them express concern for your feelings. Not once did they acknowledge that their behavior might have been hurtful. They were entirely focused on how your reaction had embarrassed them. I pulled my hand away and walked to the window, staring out at the harbor where Navy ships sat at anchor. My ships, my world, the place where I was valued for my competence, my leadership, my dedication. What happened when you challenged them? I told them that from where I stood, you'd handled an impossible situation with remarkable grace. I said that if someone had treated me the way they'd treated you, I would have responded far less diplomatically. And your father told me I didn't understand the full situation and that family loyalty meant supporting family decisions even when they seemed harsh. Your mother started crying again, but this time because I wasn't supporting their version of events. Aunt Dorothy reached into her gift bag and pulled out a small framed photo. It was a picture I'd never seen before. My grandfather, in his World War II uniform, young and proud, standing beside a Navy ship.
"This was your great-grandfather's ship," she said. "The USS Franklin. He served with distinction in the Pacific Theater. Your grandmother gave me this photo when she died, and I've been saving it for the right moment to pass it along." I took the frame with trembling hands. The resemblance was striking. We had the same determined expression, the same way of standing at attention. "Rachel, your great-grandfather would be incredibly proud of who you've become, and he'd be appalled by how your parents have treated your service." My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Dorothy says you're refusing to participate in family discussions. This needs to stop, Rachel. We're trying to help you." I showed Aunt Dorothy the message. She shook her head in disgust. "Help you? Rachel, let me ask you something. In the past 10 years, how many times have your parents attended Navy events, change of command ceremonies, promotion celebrations, ship christenings?" I thought about it. None. They've never attended a single Navy function. How many times have they asked you about your work in a way that showed genuine interest in your achievements? I can't remember any. How many times have they introduced you to their friends as our daughter, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Blackstone? Never. I'm always just our daughter Rachel or Rachel, who's in the Navy. And how many times have they asked you to compromise your military commitments for their social calendar? Every holiday, every family gathering, every important event. Aunt Dorothy nodded sadly. "Rachel, that's not family love. That's family control. Love celebrates your achievements. Love respects your choices. Love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable." My phone rang. Mom's contact photo filled the screen. "Answer it," Aunt Dorothy said. "But this time, don't let them control the conversation." I took a deep breath and answered. "Hi, Mom. Rachel, thank goodness Dorothy said she was with you. Sweetheart, we need to resolve this situation. The whole family is worried sick. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not the one who needs to resolve anything. You uninvited me from dinner, lied about why you did it, and then expected me to apologize for being hurt. That's the situation that needs resolving. Rachel, you're twisting things around. We were trying to protect you from an awkward stop. The word came out with more authority than I'd ever used with my parents before. Stop rewriting history. Stop making excuses. Stop trying to convince me that my own experience didn't happen the way it happened. Silence on the other end. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it starts with acknowledgement. You excluded me from family dinner because you were ashamed of my military service. You lied to Admiral Henderson about why I wasn't there. When your lies fell apart, you tried to pressure me into pretending none of it happened. Those are facts, not interpretations. Rachel, we love you. Love doesn't uninvite. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't spend 2 days trying to convince someone that their hurt feelings are the real problem. I looked at Aunt Dorothy, who nodded encouragingly. Mom, I'm setting a boundary right now. I will not participate in any more conversations about what I did wrong Friday night. I will not attend any family meetings designed to pressure me into apologizing for standing up for myself. And I will not pretend that 10 years of dismissing my military service didn't happen just to make family gatherings more comfortable. You can't dictate terms to your family, Rachel. I'm not dictating terms. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Aunt Dorothy smiled and raised her coffee cup in a toast. Now that, she said, sounded like a future admiral. Monday morning arrived with crisp November air, and the kind of clarity that comes after a storm has finally passed. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror adjusting my dress uniform for my meeting with Admiral Henderson, and for the first time in years, I felt completely aligned with the person looking back at me. The woman in the mirror was Lieutenant Commander Rachel Blackstone. Not the disappointed daughter, not the family embarrassment, not the stubborn rebel who'd chosen the wrong path. Just a Navy officer preparing for an important career meeting, exactly as it should be. My phone had been blissfully quiet since my conversation with Mom yesterday. No more manipulative texts, no more guilt-laden voicemails, no more family members calling to express concern about my behavior. Either they had finally gotten the message or they were regrouping for another assault. Honestly, I didn't care which one. The drive to the naval base took me through downtown Cedarbrook Heights, past the law offices where I was supposed to have worked, past the country club where I was supposed to have networked, past the life I was supposed to have lived. None of it looked appealing anymore. None of it looked like home. Admiral Henderson's office was exactly what I'd expected. Clean lines, maritime charts on the walls, photos of ships and ceremonies spanning decades of distinguished service. But what I hadn't expected was the warmth in his greeting, the genuine respect in his handshake, the way he gestured to the chair across from his desk like I belonged there. Lieutenant Commander Blackstone, thank you for coming. I trust you had a restful weekend after Friday's events? Yes, sir. Very enlightening.
He smiled at that. I imagine it was. Before we discuss your new assignment, I want to address what happened at your parents' house. In 32 years of military service, I've encountered many civilians who don't understand military life. But I've rarely seen a family so fundamentally disconnected from their own daughter's achievements. I shifted uncomfortably. Sir, with respect, they're still my family. They are, and that makes their behavior even more troubling. He leaned back in his chair. Rachel, may I share something with you? After my wife and I left your apartment Friday night, we spent the entire drive home discussing what we'd witnessed. Not just your parents' treatment of you, but your response to it.
My response, sir? Your grace under pressure, your refusal to be drawn into drama, your ability to maintain your dignity while standing firm on your principles. Those are command qualities, Lieutenant Commander. Those are the characteristics we look for in senior leadership. He opened a file on his desk, my service record, thick with commendations and performance evaluations. But what struck me most was this. In a situation where you had every right to be angry, every justification to lash out, you simply stated your boundaries and walked away. That kind of emotional intelligence, that kind of strategic thinking under personal pressure, those skills are exactly what we need in the Maritime Security Initiative. The Maritime Security Initiative, the position that could define my career, offered to me in the aftermath of the worst family crisis of my life? The irony wasn't lost on me. Sir, I'm honored by your confidence in me. It's not confidence, Lieutenant Commander. It's recognition. Your commanding officer tells me you're considering the Naval War College. With this assignment on your record, you'll not only be accepted, you'll be fast-tracked for senior command positions. Senior command. The dream I'd carried since I first put on the uniform, now within reach because I'd finally stopped apologizing for who I was? We spent the next hour discussing my new responsibilities, the scope of the program, the strategic importance of maritime security in an increasingly complex global environment. It was everything I'd worked toward, everything I'd sacrificed for, everything my family had dismissed as playing soldier. As I prepared to leave, Admiral Henderson stood and walked to his window overlooking the harbor. Rachel, I want to tell you something about military families. The best ones understand that service is a calling, not a job. They support that calling even when it's difficult, even when it requires sacrifice, even when it means their loved one chooses duty over convenience. He turned back to me. But some families never understand that. They see military service as something that takes their child away from them rather than something that makes their child into someone worth being proud of. That's not your failure. It's theirs. Walking out of his office, past the Marines standing guard, through the gates of the naval base where I belonged, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace with my choices. Not defiance, not rebellion, not stubborn independence, just quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Cassandra. Mom and Dad want to know if you'll come to Thanksgiving dinner. Trevor's parents will be there, and they're hoping you'll be cooperative. Cooperative. Even now, even after everything, they were still trying to manage me into compliance. I typed back, I'll be spending Thanksgiving with my crew. We're hosting dinner for service members who can't get home for the holidays. It was true. I'd volunteered months ago to coordinate the base Thanksgiving celebration, knowing that many of my fellow officers would be far from family. Now I realized those weren't just my colleagues. They were my chosen family, the people who understood what service meant, who celebrated achievements instead of hiding them, who measured worth by character rather than career choices. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Cassandra's response came through. That's not real family, Rachel. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed my final response. Yes, it is. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my great-grandfather's photo on the table beside me, working on my transition memo for the Maritime Security Initiative. The work was complex, challenging, important, exactly the kind of responsibility I'd trained for my entire career. My doorbell rang around 8 o'clock. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Henderson holding a casserole dish and wearing the kind of smile that reminded me what maternal pride actually looked like. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, dear. I made too much lasagna and thought you might be hungry. We sat in my small dining room, eating her excellent lasagna and talking about everything except my family. She told me about her own military childhood, about following her father from base to base, about learning that home wasn't a place, but a sense of belonging. I told her about my deployment experiences, about the satisfaction of successful missions, about the honor of serving something larger than myself. "Rachel," she said as she prepared to leave, "I want you to know that what happened Friday night wasn't just disappointing, it was shocking. Your parents missed the opportunity to celebrate an extraordinary daughter. That's their loss, not yours."
After she left, I made myself tea and stood on my small balcony overlooking the harbor. Ships moved slowly through the water, their lights twinkling like stars, carrying cargo and people to destinations around the world. My world, the world where I had value, purpose, and respect. My phone stayed silent that night. No desperate calls, no guilt-laden messages, no family members trying to convince me to return to their vision of who I should be. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for their approval, wasn't hoping for their pride, wasn't compromising myself to earn their love. I was complete without them. Tuesday morning, I reported to my new assignment as Deputy Director of the Maritime Security Initiative. My nameplate was already on the desk: Lieutenant Commander Rachel M. Blackstone. Not someone's disappointing daughter, not a family embarrassment, not a stubborn rebel who'd chosen wrong. Just a Navy officer who'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. The table where you have to pay for your seat isn't the table where you belong. 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation. Cassandra and Trevor. Spring ceremony at the Cedarbrook Heights Country Club. No RSVP card included. Apparently, my attendance wasn't expected. I sent a wedding gift anyway. A beautiful silver frame with a photo of Cassandra and me as children, back when we were sisters instead of strangers. The card read, "Wishing you happiness in your new life. From your sister, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Blackstone." Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sign your name exactly as you are, without apology or explanation. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give others is the truth of who you've become. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose for yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.